Good afternoon and good morning, everybody. Welcome to Zoom na Cartografia. Is the broadcast okay? Can you hear me well?
Yes, Raquel.
Okay, so it's a great pleasure to be here again to discuss cartography with you. I am Raquel, a participant of the Cartographic Syntax Laboratory La Casa from Unicamp, and this broadcast is offered by La Casa and Núcleo de Estudos Gramaticais, NEG from UFSC. Thank you very much for being here with us on YouTube and at the Zoom meeting too. Our guest today is Professor Ana Maria Martins. Ana Martins is professor at the Faculty of Letters from Lisbon University, and her topics of research include syntax, historical linguistics, and dialectology. Her talk today is entitled Metalinguistic Negation Markers at the Left Periphery. We remind you that after the talk, we will have some time for discussion. So please, if you have any questions, just type them down on the YouTube chat, and you can also send them to the email we're putting on the chat. Please leave your full name, country, and also the institution. And now, Professor Ana, thank you for being here today. You can start. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raquel, João, Bruno, Aquil, Sandra. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here. Good afternoon or good morning, everybody who is with us now. So I will be talking about these, what I call metalinguistic negation markers. What's going on now? Okay, it was not passing, but it passed, right? Okay, so I need to put this somewhere else. Where do I put this? This talk investigates the syntax of expressions that unambiguously convey objection in the sense of Lawrence Horn in his 1989 book, Natural History of Negation. And I will call these expressions metalinguistic negation markers. These include idioms or swear words, locative temporal deitics, WH words, and lexical instantiations of Nessing, among others. In this presentation, I will provide information on the availability of these metalinguistic negation markers across languages, and will describe the different word order patterns associated with them. So why was it that Achilles and Sandra invited me to present it in this Zoom na Cartografia series? Because I will propose that the sentential left periphery under the cartographic approach of Rizzi 97 and further subsequent developments provides the unifying link behind this cross-linguistic variety of metalinguistic negation markers, and can also explain aspects of micro-variation related to, for example, word order, the presence or absence of complementizers, or the formation of clusters putting together different metalinguistic negation markers. So I will start by exemplifying with examples from European Portuguese. I will also introduce during the talk examples taken from other languages, but my main focus is European Portuguese because I am a native speaker of European Portuguese, so I have native judgments on this data, and this is very important because sometimes it's very subtle, the interpretations we get. Okay, so I will exemplify with European Portuguese. Let's say speaker A says something like a União Europeia vai acabar, or the opposite, a União Europeia não vai acabar, that is, the European Union will come to an end, or the European Union will not come to an end. And then speaker B, let's say it's me, objects with relation to this assertion. And it is not the case that neither speaker A or B can be sure that the European Union will come to an end or not, right? So it's a matter of opinion. And what speaker B is doing is not really saying that A's assertion is false. What is saying is something like, on what basis you are saying that, or I don't believe you, or there is always an attitude of disapproval also with respect to the proposition that is being objected to. So how can this objection be built in European Portuguese? I can use an idiomatic expression, like, for example, uma ova, which literally means a fish raw, but as a metalinguistic negation marker doesn't mean in itself anything. Okay, so I can put this expression at the end of the sentence, like in BA, a União Europeia vai acabar uma ova. Or não vai acabar uma ova. I can also put it in the beginning of the sentence, like in BB, uma ova que a União Europeia vai acabar. And already note that differently from what happens in English, I could translate this in English with like hell the European Union will come to an end, or like hell the European Union will not come to an end. And certain of these idioms in English can also be in both peripheries, the right one or the left one. But when in English we have one of these idioms in the left periphery, it seems to be just opposed to the sentence, right? There is no complementizer linking, but not in European Portuguese. So if I have uma ova in the left periphery, like in BB, it is necessarily linked to the rest of the sentence by this complex complementizer, é que, which includes the copula é, and it's the same complex complementizer that appears typically in clefts. I can also object to with a sentence like BC using the word agora. The word agora usually is a temporal adverb, meaning now, but when used as a metalinguistic negation marker, again, it's devoid of meaning in itself. So I can say, não vai agora acabar. And an important difference between these word, this temporal deictic, and the same is true for locative deictic, like la, literally here, is that they can appear in the middle of the sentence, differently from the idioms that always appear on the left or right periphery. So that's another possibility that already shows us that there is variation with respect to word order, right? Then in BD, it's an example with WH words. And what is special with WH words? Well, two things. We can have a WH word at the beginning of the sentence or at the end, but it's always different words. So this qual that appears at the beginning cannot appear at the end, and the que that appears at the end cannot appear at the beginning, which each one of these words can appear alone. So I could just have qual a União Europeia vai acabar without the final WH words. I could also have only the final ones. But then what is interesting is that I can also have these cases where the sentence is sandwiched between two instantiations of WH words, like in the qual a União Europeia não vai acabar qual que. And most of these metalinguistic negation markers can also appear isolated. Same for English, like, right? In English, the answer could just be like hell, meaning I object to that, I don't believe it, right? And in European Portuguese, it could just be uma ova, agora, qual, right? We will see that there is only one metalinguistic negation marker, which is the locative one, that cannot appear isolated. Okay, so this is just for you to know which type of expressions I will be dealing with. Okay, so let's now see what basically Horn tells us about the distinction between metalinguistic negation in his interpretation and descriptive negation. Let me say that Horn did not work with these unambiguous metalinguistic negation markers that I'm interested in. He worked with sentences, English sentences with not, because those sentences can be ambiguous between a metalinguistic negation and a descriptive interpretation. Because he was working with these sentences that superficially are similar, independently of expressing one type of negation or other, he devised a number of tests to distinguish the two types of negation, and these tests are going to be very important for me to show you that these expressions I am interested in really work like metalinguistic negation markers. And I say an ambiguous one because these expressions can only express metalinguistic negation. These expressions cannot express descriptive negation or regular negation, ordinary negation. Okay, so Horn says that apparent sentence negation represents either a descriptive transfunctional operator, taking a proposition P into a proposition not P, or a metalinguistic operator, which can be glossed, I object to U, where U is crucially a linguistic utterance or utterance type rather than an abstract proposition. And he further says that it is a device for objecting to a previous utterance on any grounds whatever. It focuses not on the truth or falsity of a proposition, but on the assertability of an utterance. So when the speaker objects using these markers, the speaker is basically saying, I don't think you have evidence to say that, or what we are saying bears a presupposition or an implication that I don't accept. So the speaker is not accepting the assertion like something that is willing to accept as part of the common ground. Okay, so Horn's tests to distinguish between metalinguistic negation and descriptive negation are these ones. Metalinguistic negation is excluded from out of the blue sentences because it's always an objection. So it's always a responding move in the sense of Farkas and Bruce. It's not initiating an initiating move. Metalinguistic negation does not license negative polarity items or N-words. This is a very clear distinction with respect to descriptive negation. Complementarily, it is compatible with positive polarity items, including the type that is completely excluded from ordinary negative sentences. And there is evidence that metalinguistic negation is an instance of external negation, therefore high, outside the IP area, and that it is a main, close, or root phenomenon. So I will now start by showing English examples taken from Horn, and then I will show that the European Portuguese words I'm interested in and similar expressions in other languages behave as expected if they are metalinguistic negation markers. So take, for example, the example in 2. Someone says, speaker A says, Chris managed to solve some problems. And speaker B can't answer to this, BA, Chris didn't manage to solve any problems. So here is saying that the A's assertion is false, right? Descriptive negation in BA. But it can also answer something like, Chris didn't manage to solve some problems, he solved them easily. And here he's not saying that it's false that Chris solved some problems, but he's saying that you should use the word manage because this has a false implication, the implication that it was difficult to solve them. Note that while in BA, you have the NPI any, Chris didn't manage to solve any problems. In B, where you have metalinguistic negation, you don't have any but some, right? Chris didn't manage to solve some problems, he solved them easily. In the examples in 3 are used to show you that while the descriptive negation sentence can be uttered out of the blue, I arrive to work and meet a colleague and say, you know what, after all, Chris didn't manage to solve any problems. And this is okay if, of course, he knows who is Chris and what problems I'm talking about. But I can initiate a conversation with this sentence, but wouldn't initiate a conversation with, you know what, after all, Chris didn't manage to solve some problems. It solved them easily, or like hell, Chris managed to solve some problems. It doesn't work as an out of the blue sentence. Same in Portuguese. So for example, let's say I go to walk in a park and I'm expecting to see squirrels because I like squirrels. and I'm disappointed because I don't see any squirrels. So I can say the sentence in 4A, hoje não há esquilos no jardim. Oh, today there aren't squirrels in the park. Fine, but it wouldn't make sense if I said 4C, hoje há esquilos no jardim uma ova. You cannot process it, doesn't make any sense. Or if you say B, or hoje há agora esquilos no jardim, or today is now squirrels in the park, it doesn't make much sense either, because the only interpretation that I can get for agora here is the temporal one. I cannot get the metalinguistic negation interpretation. With respect to the non-licensing of NPIs, so the example in 5 is the same as in 2, as we already saw. We have any in the A answer of B, but could not have any in the B one. So when you have metalinguistic negation always repeats what is in the antecedent. So you cannot change from some to any, you repeat some. The positive polarity item. You have another example in 6. Bill has already forgotten that today is Friday, and the descriptive negation answer would be like in BA, maybe he hasn't yet, but will soon, and yet is a negative polarity item. But if instead you have an objection expressed through metalinguistic negation, you cannot use yet. So you can say, Bill hasn't already forgotten that today is Friday because today is Thursday. Okay, this is the case where you have a false presupposition introduced by the initial assertion. And same in 7, you still love me. Descriptive negation answer would be, I don't love you anymore, the NPI. But if I just construct a metalinguistic negation objection, it will be something like hell, I still love you. And you cannot have like hell, I love you anymore. It's ungrammatical. Let me skip this one. So an example, a Portuguese example, someone says what is in 8.8, tu é que conhece uma pessoa que sabe arranjar isto, you surely know someone who can fix this, and I can just negate this with regular descriptive negation, like in BA, eu não conheço ninguém que saiba arranjar isto, I don't know anyone who can fix that, and in this case I use the word ninguém, nobody. But I can also not just not confirm what speaker A is saying, but disapproving it. So like I'm saying, but why do you think that? So what evidence do you have to know that I know someone who can fix that? So I can answer with BB. Eu conheço agora alguém que saiba arranjar isso. And what is relevant here is that now if I use the word agora as a metalinguistic negation marker, I will have to use the word alguém, somebody, and I cannot use the word ninguém. So the NPI or N-word doesn't matter, whatever you call it, ninguém is not possible in this context, and instead you have to have the positive polarity item in this case. And note that it is not the case that you always are just repeating an antecedent, because in this case alguém is not in the antecedent. And also the example in 8A prime, let's say that 8A prime is a possible answer to 8BA. And this example is relevant to show you that it is not the case that there is an incompatibility with having a negative word or NPI in a sentence and also metalinguistic negation marker. There is no incompatibility. The thing is that the metalinguistic negation marker doesn't license the NPI or N-word. So if this NPI or N-word is licensed by descriptive negation, then you can also have their metalinguistic negation and no problem at all. Okay, so I could say something, não conheces agora ninguém que saiba arranjar isto. My addressee just said it doesn't know anybody that can fix, and I object to that, saying this. nonsense, you don't know anyone who can fix this. And here you have the N-word negation, you have metalinguistic negation marker, and it's okay because you have here this not expressing descriptive negation, therefore licensing the presence of negation. As for PPIs, we have here an example with the expression do diabo. Do diabo is a positive intensifier in Portuguese, and it is incompatible with regular negation. So I can say 9A, tiveste uma sorte do diabo, so lucky you were. But I cannot say something like 9BA, eu não tive uma sorte do diabo, because do diabo doesn't go well with regular negation. But no problem at all in putting it together with metalinguistic negation. So if the answer of B is tive agora uma sorte do diabo, tive lá uma sorte do diabo is perfect, no problem at all. Like hell, I was so lucky. As for metalinguistic negation being an instance of external negation, we have here an example of sentences sentences where you have negation and also an adverbial reason clause, so complex sentences with a subordinate clause, which is an adverbial reason clause. What happens in these sentences is that you get scope ambiguity. So the reason can take a large scope over neg, or instead you can have an interpretation where neg takes scope over reason. So let's look at A. We have the sentence, he's not in jail because he lied. And this sentence, this is descriptive negation. And this sentence has two possible interpretations. If reason scopes over neg, the interpretation is it is because he lied that he's not in jail. If the interpretation is one where neg scopes over reason, the interpretation is it is not because he lied that he is in jail. What happens when instead of descriptive negation we have metalinguistic negation is that only one of the interpretations is possible. So there is no possible interpretation with reason scoping over neg. Only the interpretation with neg in the higher position scoping over reason is possible. So if I have 11, is in some fucking jail because he lied, I put here the sum to make sure that this is metalinguistic negation, not descriptive negation, because if it was descriptive, it would be any and not some. And B replies, isn't in some fucking jail because he lied. That doesn't add up. The only interpretation is the one where you have neg in the higher position scoping over reason. That is, it is not because he lied that he is in jail. And the same happens if I build a sentence in Portuguese, for example, with agora. Ele está agora na prisão porque mentiu. The only interpretation is this one. It is not because he lied that he's in jail, what we could translate in English with like hell, he is in prison because he lied. Okay, I will skip this slide, but this was just to show that in different languages like Malay, Japanese, or Korean, there are also some words that only express metalinguistic negation, not descriptive negation, and it has been shown that all these words have this external nature, are express an external negation. For being a root phenomenon, so now here I build these examples with agora. And what the examples show is that when agora is in the root clause, it can have the metalinguistic negation interpretation, but as soon as I put it inside the subordinate clause, it can only be interpreted as a temporal adverb. it cannot be interpreted as a metalinguistic negation marker. And so this shows that the metalinguistic negation necessarily seems to move or be merged in a high position in left periphery that does not exist in all types of subordinate clauses, let's say. So here the example is: o governo anunciou que vai baixar os impostos. The government announced that it will lower the taxes. Something that is not common, right? That's not usually what governments do. And so I object to this. I don't believe it. O governo anunciou agora que vai baixar os impostos. This agora can appear in different positions. Could be at the end too. O governo anunciou que vai baixar os impostos agora. Or I can answer with just agora. And I'm saying the same. The government announced that it's going to lower the taxes. It could be like hell or other expressions in English. But if I put the agora inside the complement clause, like in D, o governo anunciou que vai agora baixar os impostos, ou o governo anunciou que vai baixar agora os impostos, even if this is a reply to 12a, I cannot get the metalinguistic negation interpretation. I can only get the interpretation where agora means now. Okay, so after applying these 5 tests, I can conclude that, in fact, these expressions we are observing behave as metalinguistic negation expressions, markers. And so I tried to see which of these expressions were identified in the literature in different languages as having this same behavior. So what expressions I could consider, not just in Portuguese, but in the language of the world, as expressions of metalinguistic negation unambiguously. The larger group is the group of idioms and swear words. Swear words, you have there in blue many expressions that are used in English with these functions, so like hell, my eye, no way, no chance, yeah, right, bullshit, poppycock, and many others. This is the larger group. Then there are the temporal or locative deitics, and these I for now just know of this behavior of temporal locative deitics in Portuguese. I wasn't able to find any other language where temporal locative deitics behave as metalinguistic negation markers. I'm sure they exist, but I don't know. Then we have in English the word nothing, and correlates of nothing in other languages also can work as metalinguistic negation markers. And then there are, let's say, mixed types like these XK expressions that are related in the literature for Argentinian Spanish. Okay, so here's some examples of the idioms and swear words, ones from English. In Spanish, I found reference to these ones: una leche, las narices, una mierda, los cojones. In Portuguese, uma ovo, tanas, uma merda, caraças. In francês, monnaie, tu parles. So different expressions in different languages. Some expressions are more common, so you find them in different languages, like body parts are very common to express these metalinguistic negation markers. Okay, so I will now look at their syntax, first more superficially, looking especially at word order, to then make some descriptive generalizations, and subsequently proposing an analysis. Let's first look at idioms and swear words. These expressions always, as I already told you, always appears on the periphery of the sentence, either the left or the right. In 14, you have a French example, mon œil que le roi de France chauffe. So this must be a reply to someone who said that the king of France is bald, but this is a false presupposition because, of course, there is no king of France nowadays, right? So the response could be this: Mon œil que le roi de France est chauve, il n'y a pas de roi de France. Or you can have the expression mon œil, my eye, that there is the same expression in English at the end of the clause. And as you see, French is very much like Portuguese and different from English in the sense that when you have this expression sentence finally, it's just opposed to the sentence. There is no linking, no overt linking. But when it is at the beginning, you have a complementizer linking the idiom to the sentence. So this complementizer in Portuguese, like in 15BA, the complementizer is é que, copula plus that. In French is just the complementizer. And we can also have these expressions appearing isolated, like in 15BC. Now, in Spanish, this is Peninsular Spanish. An interesting fact with respect to Spanish is that in Spanish, like in Portuguese and French, you also have the complementizer usually appears linking the expression to the sentence when it is sentence initial, but there is an alternative strategy, and that alternative strategy is one in 16b. That is, instead of una mierda que yo voy a disculparme, like hell, I will apologize, instead of merging a complementizer, it is possible to have subject-verb inversion, like in 16b, right? Una mierda voy yo a disculparme. A shit go I to apologize. So this is an alternative to the presence of the complementizer. In 17, you have just an isolated occurrence of the idiom here. Las narices, the noses. Now, when we look at temporal and deictic locatives, which are the words lá, cá, agora, or alguma vez, literally there, here, now, sometime, these words behave differently from idioms, in mainly by the fact that can appear in the middle of the sentence. They don't have to appear sentence initially or sentence finally. They can be in the middle, like in 18BB. So now the initial sentence is again, o governo vai baixar os impostos, the government is lowering the taxes, and I can object to this saying, o governo vai agora baixar os impostos. The government goes, metalinguistic negation marker, lower the taxes. Meaning nonsense, like hell, the government is going to do that, right? And this is possible for agora and for lá. And also another difference is that two of these metalinguistic negation marker can appear together, can cluster together, but not freely. It must be agora with one of the locative ones. So agora can cluster together with lá or with cá, but the two locatives cannot cluster together with each other. Also, these metalinguistic negation markers can appear at the end of the sentence, like in BC, vai baixar os impostos agora, or at the beginning, alguma vez vai baixar os impostos, except for the locatives, because lá and cá are always strictly post-verbal and cannot appear isolated, nor sentence finally or sentence initially. Here we have the metalinguistic negation, the WH words, and what we see with the WH words is that they can appear isolated. So same starting sentence, the government is going to lower the taxes. I can just answer qual. Of course, this requires a certain intonation, right? Qual, qual que? Okay, so I can use them, the qual alone or the qual with the que together, isolated. I can answer with 19BB, qual vai baixar os impostos, using only the initial one, qual, or as answer like in BC, vai baixar os impostos o que, only with the final one, but o que cannot appear at the beginning and qual cannot appear at the end. And then in D is the case where the sentence is sandwiched between them. Qual vai baixar os impostos o quê? Ou qual vai baixar os impostos qual quê? Okay, Spanish also has this possibility of WH words to expressing metalinguistic negation markers, but usually the final one gets together with an idiom. So it's not just the basic WH words, but it becomes a mixed type. And I will put aside then in my analysis all the mixed types. This was just to show you that in a language of very different family, Hungarian, a pre-European language, there seems to be also a word, the hogi, which contains a WH word and seems to work as a metalinguistic negation marker. So WH words really appear a little bit everywhere with this behavior. Words like nothing, nada in Portuguese, for Rio Plata in Spanish, minga, can appear in English always sentence finally. In Portuguese, nada can also appear sentence medially, like in 21BA. The government is lowering the taxes, vai nada baixar os impostos. Of course, baixar os impostos can be deleted, and in that case, nada appears at the end, but it's possible to have it in the middle, or it can appear at the end, like in BB, vai baixar os impostos, nada. And here are examples with minga from Argentinian Spanish. It can be at the beginning, like in 22. At the beginning, without complementizer following it, minga, lo voy a extrañar para nada in 22, but can also be followed by the complementizer que, like in 23, minga que se dio por vencido, or can appear isolated, like in the second occurrence in 24, just minga. Okay, these are examples from also Argentinian Spanish, but these are mixed type expressions like ma que, otra que, como que, minga que. I will not talk about these ones. And I'm running a little bit because time goes fast. Okay, so these are the patterns of word order that we saw. In pattern 1, we have the metalinguistic negation marker at the beginning, and most types of metalinguistic negation markers can appear with this pattern. The exception are the locative deictics. Pattern 2 have instead the metalinguistic negation markers sentence finally, and again, must metalinguistic negation markers except the locatives. Then we have pattern 3, where the metalinguistic negation marker is in the middle of the sentence, and this is possible only for the locative temporal ones. Pattern 4 is the one for WH words, where we have a WH word at the beginning, other WH words at the end, so the sentence sandwiched in the middle, and most metalinguistic negation markers can appear alone. The locatives can, and as far as the literature tells, in English that has so many idiomatic expressions that can work as metalinguistic negation markers, some of them appear easily at the beginning of or at the end, but others prefer one of the positions. But that seems to be also subject to variation between speakers and dialects. Okay, other descriptive observations that we can do is that the complementizer, be it que or ek, may surface in pattern 1, but in alternative subject-verb inversion may occur. A metalinguistic negation marker that allows pattern 3, that can be in the middle, does not co-occur with the complementizer when it is in the beginning of the sentence. And this is the more important. I go to the analysis. So let's say that different aspects of the metalinguistic negation markers point to the sentential left periphery. First, they are non-argumental, descriptively meaningless, discourse-oriented material, and express speaker's attitude generally of disapproval. It's not just an objection, but it's a disapproving objection. These metalinguistic negation markers include WH phrases, and WH phrases are usually related to the left periphery. Many of them associate with the complementizer que or que, which again associates with the left periphery, and also the fact that metalinguistic negation is external negation and is only part of root main clauses and not embedded clauses. So all these aspects show, I think, that these metalinguistic negation markers have a syntax that is related to the clearly related to the left periphery, and that's where cartography really showed very useful. Okay, this is a well-known proposal, cartographic proposal of Rizzi 97. Now this is 2004, and as you know, there are many alternative proposals for the left periphery nowadays. I adopted this one. I will say why. This is the cartography of the left periphery proposed by Alice Corr in 2016 in her PhD dissertation on Ibero-Romance languages, considering many dialectal variants, contemporary and older. And what is important for me here, two things are important. It is important to have this field above the CP fields, this part of the sentence higher up, with in her proposal, these are speech act phrases following Margaret Spee's word and other work and other authors. These same kind of high projections are called by other authors, for example, speech adequacy phrases or speaker attitude phrases or affect phrases. That is, they all relate to the speaker and to the expression of speaker attitudes and emotions. Other aspect that is relevant, especially to deal with the locative deitics, is the splitting of force P in three different projections, that is evaluative, evidential, and declarative. In the structural analysis that I will now show you as my proposals, I will use this split force P just to account for the deitic locative ones, and in the other cases, because it's irrelevant for me to know exactly where inside force P is the metalinguistic negation marker, I will use a simpler structure without this splitting. So the categories in red are the ones I'm going to use to account for the syntax of metalinguistic negation markers. And so for reasons of simplifications, I will just not put in the structure the other categories. I'm not saying that they are not there. I'm just saying that I think that they are not relevant to account for the metalinguistic negation markers I'm studying. Okay, so here is pattern 1. And my hypothesis for pattern 1, when we have the metalinguistic negation marker at the beginning of the sentence, so sentence initially, when we have idioms, I exemplify here with French Monet and Portuguese uma ova, I place these constituents in a focus P, and consider that they are linked to the rest of the sentence through an overt complementizer placed in fin-p. And in fact, my initial the initial observation that led me to propose these elements are in focus is the fact that the chosen complementizer in Portuguese is this "é que" that is so clearly related to clefts and to focus. Here, of course, for some reason, I don't have an explanation for it, but I guess probably it's related to the syntax of focus in English. In English, fin does not need to be filled when the idiom is at the beginning of the sentence. Then the alternative strategy we have in Spanish in those cases where you have subject-verb inversion, like in 28, what I'm proposing is that in this case, instead of merging a complementizer in fin, what you do is moving the verb to fin, and this is an alternative to fill fin and create this relation between the metalinguistic negation marker in focus and the rest of the sentence. So verb movement is an alternative to merging a complementizer in fin. So here 28 and 29 is to show you the two possibilities you have in Spanish, right? Una mierda que yo voy. You insert in 29, insert the complementizer, no subject verb inversion. In 28, you don't insert the complementizer, you move the verb, therefore subject verb inversion results. Of course, it is also possible, and that's why these metalinguistic negation markers can appear isolated. It is also possible to just have IP ellipsis, deletion of the IP, and in that case is if there is IP ellipsis, so you have the metalinguistic negation marker in focus, then you have IP ellipsis, therefore you don't need anything filling the fin head, right? If you have IP ellipsis, you just see the metalinguistic negation marker, which is sitting in focus. Now, comparing pattern 1 with pattern 2, pattern 2 is the one that have the metalinguistic negation marker at the end. Instead of at the beginning. What happens? What I'm proposing is that the metalinguistic negation marker is sitting in the same place, that is in focus, but now, like in 31 and 32 prime, but now what happens is that you move the IP to one of the speech at positions. I take this to be a type of topicalization. You topicalize the IP to a very high position, and that's how you derive the order where the metalinguistic negation marker appears sentence finally, but in fact the metalinguistic negation marker is just sitting in the same place in the left periphery. It is in focus. It is the IP that can be in situ or deleted or moved to a higher position, right? So pattern 1 and 2 are variants from each other. But as for the syntax of the metalinguistic negation marker, the metalinguistic negation marker is always in the same place. What about agora that can appear in a medial position? Well, now with respect to agora, I'm proposing that agora is not merged in focus, but in force. And we'll see why I'm proposing this. Okay, so let's say that agora can appear like in, agora is always merged in force. In 33, you have agora in force and the IP in situ. This gives you agora in initial position. You can, like in 34 and like in patterns 1 and 2, move the IP to a higher position, and you get the order where agora appears in sentence final position. And how come can you have agora in the middle of the sentence while idioms cannot be in the middle of the sentence? And the answer is that because agora is merged in force, not in focus, focus is free. and you move to focus a constituent that is the focus of your objection. So with agora, you can either object to the whole sentence, or you can object to a particular part of the sentence, right? And if you are objecting to a particular constituent, you move that constituent to focus, and then you can move the remnant IP to, again, the high topic position. And that's how you derive the medial position, right? So in 35, the constituent os impostos was moved to focus, and then the remnant IP to the speech at position, and you get your the vai baixar agora os impostos. You can also instead move to focus, the constituent baixar os impostos, then move the remnant IP to the high position, and you have vai agora baixar os impostos. And that's why you can have agora in different positions, because its merging place is focus, is force, not focus. It leaves focus free to receive the focus of your objection. Here, this is just an example to show you that, in fact, you get different interpretations with different word orders of agora. So the starting point is the sentence, Vladimir morreu no sábado, Vladimir died last Saturday, and I can just object to that. Morreu agora, no way. or morreu, but I can say something like BB, morreu agora no sábado. And if I say morreu agora no sábado, I'm not objecting to the fact that he died. I'm objecting to the fact that he died Saturday. The focus of my objection is the day of the death, not the death itself. So in B, I can continue with morreu agora no sábado, morreu no domingo. No way, he died last Saturday, he died last Sunday. And this is a good continuation for B, because the focus of my objection is no sábado, okay? Whereas in BC, so I have the same sentence, morreu agora no sábado. Then if I continue saying, o Vladimir tem uma saúde de ferro, Vladimir is the healthiest person I know, this is not a good continuation, because this would be a good continuation if I don't believe that he died, not if I don't believe that he died Saturday, okay? Well, I go on, but I guess this gives you the idea, shows you that different positions for agora mean different focus of the objection. The difference between agora e uma ova with respect to its merging position, so uma ova in focus, agora in force, becomes also visible when we have these metalinguistic negation markers associated with nominal fragments. Okay, so in 38A, someone says, compramos carro vermelho, let's buy a red car. And my objection is that it's not that we buy a car, I agree with that, but I don't like red cars. So my objection is against the car being red, right? So if I object using the metalinguistic negation marker agora, I will object like in 38BA, agora vermelho. But if I use the metalinguistic negation marker uma ova, I will say vermelho uma ova. Okay, so agora and uma ova don't appear in the same position with the nominal fragments, and uma ova cannot appear at the beginning. And why is this? Because uma ova is lower in the left periphery than agora. So if you use agora with a nominal fragment, that nominal fragment is precisely the focus of the objection. So you move it to focus. So in agora, vermelho is in focus and agora in force. But if you use uma ova, you cannot move the focus of your objection to focus, because focus already has the metalinguistic negation marker there. So how do you derive it? You can move the focus of your objection to a high topic position. So vermelho uma ova reads like something like, as for being red, I object. I strongly object to uma ova stays for, I strongly object to that. This is just, I cannot explore this here, but just to to tell you that these different positions in the left periphery of different metalinguistic negation markers seem to also relate to interpretation in respect to a scale of force, in the sense that some metalinguistic negation markers convey a mild criticism, whether others seem to be stronger, and according to my native judgments, the ones that express stronger disapproval are the ones that are merged in focus, while the ones merged in force, like agora, are milder, are not so strong. Now, the pattern 3 is the case of la that can appear in the middle of the sentence, but it's not just that it can, it's that it's its place, because la must be strictly post-verbal. So what happens with la? The hypothesis is that la has some kind of deficiency, be it morphological or phonological, and it cannot stay alone in force. So la is a deictic like agora, and I think it also is placed in force. In fact, but I can develop that here in previous work. I proposed that la is not directly merged in the left periphery, but it moves from inside the IP. Anyway, it ends up in force, but for some reason it cannot stay alone in force. It needs support. So what I'm proposing is that la is in evidential P. It fills the evidential head, but needs that something moves to evaluative P in order to support it. Let's say it cannot be in first position inside force P. It needs to be in second position. So something needs to be before it. Usually it is the verb that moves to evaluative P, like in 39, and that's how you derive the fact that it is usually strictly post-verbal. So o governo vai lá baixar os impostos. Because lies in force, you have, again, focus free to receive the focus of the objection, and then you can have remnant IP topicalization. There is, however, an alternative to moving the verb to evaluative, and that alternative, and that's how you form a cluster of metalinguistic negation markers, the alternative is to merge agora in evaluative instead of moving the verb. And then you form the cluster, o governo vai agora lá baixar os impostos, and this is the only case where you don't need to have lá strictly post-verbal. Also, when you form this cluster, with agora in evaluative and lá in evidential, now this cluster can appear isolated. While lá can never appear isolated, I can object with agora lá. Okay, so given that lá is supported by agora, it can occur by itself. Now, finally, pattern 4, the one with the WH words. Here, what I'm proposing is that the lower WH words, the ones that appear at the right periphery superficially, are in focus. So, like in 42AB, qual que, o que are in focus. And what about qual, the one that is obligatorily sentence initial, cannot be in any other position? I'm proposing that this qual is very high, is the metalinguistic negation marker that is merged higher in the left periphery. It's directly merged in the speech act domain. It might be an overt manifestation of a speech act operator in that position. And so you can have, for the WH words, several ways of expressing metalinguistic negation, just by filling focus with some WH words, just by filling the speech at periphery with qual, or having both together. And sorry that I'm running, but then we will have more time for questions and comments. So here I want to show you an argument in favor of having qual as the highest of the metalinguistic negation markers. And this argument is the following. Qual is the and now I'm speaking about, of course, European Portuguese and my judgments of European Portuguese. Qual is the only metalinguistic negation marker that can object to a previous objection by another metalinguistic negation marker. Okay, so let's see 45. Again, someone says, let us buy a red car. Compramos carro vermelho. And speaker B objects. He doesn't like the idea of buying a red car. And so speaker B says, agora vermelho. And speaker A, who wants to maintain the idea of buying a red car, can say something like, qual agora vermelho? Vá lá. Okay, it's a way of objecting against the objection of speaker B. And this is why is this possible? Because in the left periphery, qual is placed in a higher position than agora. Agora is in force, qual is in the speech act domain, and so scopes over the part of the sentence that contains agora. And the same can happen with uma ova. So like in 46, compramos carro vermelho. Speaker B says, vermelho uma ova. And A can come and say, qual vermelho uma ova? Please agree. Vá lá is a form of saying, please agree with me. Here the different analysis for nominal fragments with the different metalinguistic negation markers in these different positions. So either force when you have agora, or focus when you have uma ova, or this speech act high position when we have qual. And that's it. So what's next? What would I like to do from here? I would like to broaden the cross-linguistic typological coverage of my investigation to know if there are further types of unambiguous metalinguistic negation markers, and then test and refine the analysis against this new empirical evidence. I should say that I also think that an ingredient that I did not introduce here, but is going to be important when the cross-linguistic typological coverage is broadened, is that possibly not everything that at first sight seems to be a metalinguistic negation marker sometimes might be not in the same stage of grammaticalization as the metalinguistic negation markers I talked about. And because diachronically it's very clear that there is a movement from lower positions to higher positions. So I think these metalinguistic negation markers I talked about in European Portuguese are in a very high stage of grammaticalization, but the same words, and I'm thinking in about Brazilian Portuguese, for example, that has more or less the same words expressed in metalinguistic negation, but maybe not as grammaticalized as in European Portuguese, so not necessarily in the same positions in left periphery. Especially, I think, because I studied La, the diachronic evolution of La, and one step of the change is having La in rhetorical questions. Having these elements in rhetorical questions is a previous stage before they becoming real grammaticalized metalinguistic negation markers. And then if they are associated with rhetorical questions, they won't necessarily be in the same or in as high positions as the ones we see them when they are fully grammaticalized. And then I would very much like, but it seems really difficult, to be able to unify the syntax of metalinguistic negation sentences with unambiguous markers, with the syntax of metalinguistic negation expressed by not, though this seems really difficult because with respect to word order, metalinguistic negation sentences will not just have the same word order as descriptive negation ones, and don't give us the same type of clear evidence as metalinguistic negation markers. But so that's anyway a question I would like to explore, whether the syntax of metalinguistic negation expressed by not is in some way also special, although it seems just like the syntax of descriptive negation. And that's it. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Professor Ana Martins, for this very thought-provoking talk. I am Bruno Lima. I'm PhD candidate at Unicamp and member of the La Casa research group. And I'm going to moderate these questions and comments sent by email and type on our YouTube chat. So if you have any questions or comments, just type them on the YouTube chat or send us an email. The email address is the one which appears on the YouTube chat. And so, well, there's a question sent to me by email by a student of the La Casa research group that I'm going to read right now. All right, Professor? So, okay. So at the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned a couple of properties of metalinguistic negation construction, one of them concerning their invisibility with respect to negative concord. So you're taking metalinguistic negation markers to enter synthetic derivation very high in the structure, say in the CP domain. In the lack of negative concord, the reason for merging the metalinguistic negation markers in the CP and not, for instance, in the inflection domain, where there is a couple of categories with some pragmatic-like import, categories like speech act, evaluative, evidential, mirative, epistemic, etc. And there's arrived another question by email, this time by a student from NEG group, which is somewhat related to this first question. So I'm going to read it at once, right? So both questions are being copied for you on the Zoom chat. Okay, Professor?
I'm seeing it, yeah.
Oh, okay. Perfect. You present one slide on scope ambiguity, proving the examples in 10 and 11, suggesting that metalinguistic negation constructors are a root clause phenomenon. The fact that metalinguistic negation sentence only allowed the wide scope reading in structure featuring because clause is also a clue to externally merge metalinguistic negation markers directly in the left periphery. So there's
Thank you. So starting with this question, the answer is yes. Yes, that's really one of the reasons, one of the aspects I take as empirical evidence to merge these elements high in the structure. And as for the first question, so why do I place them in the CP domain or higher and not in the IP domain? Because of all the facts I showed with respect to word order of these expressions relative to each other, or the relation between the interpretation of these sentences and things like focus, evaluative, evidential, mirative. I guess so. Here I'm asked why not place them in the inflectional domain where there are categories with these same interpretative values. I guess here I'm taking a different theoretical perspective because I'm associated these interpretative values to the CP domain and not to the IP domain. Anyway, as I told you during my presentation, in an earlier work that is published in Natural Language and Linguistic Theory, I studied in particular comparatively the words agora and lá to show that, in fact, most metalinguistic negation markers and agora between them are directly merged, according to my analysis, are directly merged in the left periphery, but there are also what I called at the time internal metalinguistic negation markers like La. And with respect to La, in fact, I propose that it is first merged in the IP domain, and then it can move to different positions in the IP domain and then the CP domain. But then the result is that La has a different pragmatic import depending where it stays within the functional structure of the clause. So what I propose is that La, which can be just an emphatic marker in Portuguese, if it is an emphatic marker, it is in the IP domain. If it moves to the CP domain, at earlier times, it was a marker of rhetorical questions. And later, and now this later is diachronically because I looked when each one of these pragmatic values developed for La, and the later one is the metalinguistic negation one. So first it appears, of course, it was always a locative, and it still is, right? It didn't stop working as a locative adverb, but then it starts appearing as an emphatic marker devoid of the locative meaning. Then later it appears in rhetorical questions, and later in metalinguistic negation sentences. And I think that each of these steps of the diachronic path show La moving to higher and higher positions, and it's an interesting evolution, which I called pragmaticization instead of grammaticalization, because it's in this case La, when it starts to move to a higher position, doesn't lose the possibility of also staying in a lower one, but depending on where it stays, it has a different interpretive effect. So in fact, the word La is very, very rich in Portuguese. It can have a lot of different values, and I associate these different values with the possibility of La being in different positions in the functional structure. What I could also say with respect to this first question is then I didn't present it here, but I also related this work on objections with the work of Farkas and Bruce that distinguish between absolute polarity features and relative polarity features, and responding assertions have both absolute polarity features and relative ones, because when you have a response, you either keep the polarity value of the question, or you reverse it. So in a Farkas and Bruce approach, when you keep the same value, they say you have the relative polarity feature same, and when you reverse it, you have the reverse relative polarity. And I treated the objection in Horn sense as also a type of relative polarity feature. And I say that while the absolute polarity features, so affirmation, negation, in Farkas and Bruce is plus and minus, these features are within the IP domain. I put them in Zanutini's pole or Laca's sigma, but within the IP domain. The relative polarity features higher up in the CP domain, I consider that they are in force. So this also goes together with the idea that these elements belong to the CP space or higher, so really the left periphery. I mean, I think I wouldn't be able to explain all the aspects of micro variation that I showed here if I was working just with the IP space.
All right, thank you, Professor. Teresa Biberauer from Cambridge just sent us the following supportive comment. Thank you, Teresa, for being here with us. And the message is, thank you for a very rich and inspiring talk, as always, Ana Maria. You say that
Thank
thing in English does need to be filled in structure of the kind of you are discussing, but the L1 varieties of English I am familiar with, there are circumstances where idioms and swear words would need to be integrated via V2 structure, where the verb has to move to the C domain to allow the relevant elements to integrate when they are clause initial. So, like hell, will the EU come to an end? My eye, will I apologize? And this fits the analysis you're proposing particularly well, as English has residual V2, and the class of elements that trigger this V2 are folks-related elements. Negation as in never in my life had I heard such a nonsense. Degrees as in so hard did she work that, blah, blah, blah. WH elements as in regular questions, as in what was she reading? So as in some cases of this case you discuss here, it looks as if the auxiliary needs to move in the C domain. It's just focus rather than thing in English. It is also possible to have structures without subject auxiliary inversion, but I think there's some subtle meaning distinction in play. So English probably also makes use of multiple parts of the CP domain, as you show it, as you show us in your talk. Overall, then there seems to be a lot of cross-linguistic evidence that the C domain is key in understanding metalinguistic negation. Different languages just make use of different components of the articulated C domain, which here cartography helpfully allows us to tease apart. So thank you again. This was great. So this is the message from Teresa.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much, Teresa, for the comments and data and observations, very rich. Can I then after the talk have everything that is here in the chat? Bruno and Akilj? I can't hear you.
Sorry, sorry. Could you please repeat, because I got a delay in my internet connection. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem. I was just asking if after the talk I can have all the questions that are here in the chat.
Oh, sure.
Of course you
Please.
can. Email you.
Please.
We can email.
Because it's really
them.
important for me to have all these comments and questions to think about them. I didn't know about these other varieties of English, for example, that Teresa talked about, but of course, very important of all the facts about subject-verb inversion, right? That are also clear evidence that we have the CP domain involved here. Of course, different positions in the CP domain is not only the case I talked before of different degrees of grammaticalization, but it will be also the interaction within a language system between these metalinguistic negation structures and other structures that involve the left periphery in this particular language. So it really is expected that there are some more variation than when I talked about here, but I think there is, in fact, and thank you, Teresa, for pointing that a lot of evidence that the CP domain is being used in these cases.
All right. Thank you, Professor. Okay, Raquel from our La Casa research group sent me a question that I'm going to read, as her microphone is not working very well. So thank you so much for this interesting talk. Your research is very rich and brings good unification for the phenomenon that happened quite different in the languages. My doubt is related to the inversion of polarity. With Brazilian Portuguese, the structure V no analyzed as metalinguistic negation in the literature, interacting with description negation does not provoke inversion of polarity. So, ela não fez isso não, meaning she did do it. Uma ova que ela não fez isso, meaning she did it. Or, onde que Joana não fez isso, meaning she did it. In European Portuguese, this lack of inversion of polarity occurs too. How can we distinguish this difference related to the inversion of polarity? Thank you. So, I don't know if this question.
Let's see if I understand well the question. I think that that depends on what you are calling polarity, because you need to distinguish between the absolute features and the relative ones. So, in fact, when you have metalinguistic negation, you don't reverse the absolute features, right? And you don't really have reverse. Maybe I will show the slides relating to Farkas and Bruce. You don't reverse in the sense that you are not asserting the opposite assertion, and you are not saying that the previous assertion is false, but you can object to a positive assertion or to a negative assertion. So the examples here are all examples of objection to a negative assertion. So if you, like, uma ova que ela não diz isso, you are objecting to she not saying that. You are saying you don't believe that. You don't think your adversary has evidence to say such a thing. So in this sense, you are not accepting the proposition, and you can do that not accepting a negative proposition or not accepting a positive one. But I don't take it to be reversal, because using the pragmatic system proposed by Farkas and Bruce, I would say that you don't put on the table the opposite proposition of the one your adversary proposed. You are not so strong as saying, no, what you say is false, and I'm now saying the proposition that is true. You are just rejecting to accept the previous preposition. So I think this is the difference between objecting and reversing, because in objecting, you don't necessarily expect that your alternative point of view, let's say, will be accepted by your adversary. So maybe I will show that if I can. Is there? Okay, it's moving. This was Brazilian Portuguese. Okay, so this is this model of conversational update proposed by Farkas and Bruce, and this is their system, plus and minus for the absolute polarity features, and same and reverse for the relative ones. So if we start from 48A, Sam is already home. This is an initiating assertion, so no relative features, just the absolute ones, and the absolute is plus. Then you can answer with a confirmation, saying yes, you already is. So you maintain the plus, and the relative feature is same. This is a confirmation. When you confirm, you say, okay, we agree. So this becomes part of the common ground. This is not anymore in dispute on the table. So we agree on this. Or you don't agree, but it's not just that you don't agree, but you reverse. You say, no, he isn't yet. But here you have evidence to assert this, to say that the initial proposition is wrong. And so now when you have reverse, that implies that the absolute polarity feature also moves from affirmation to negation. Or if your starting port is negation, like in 49, if you reverse, this implies a change on the absolute polarity feature. But then what I propose is that you have a third possibility besides. So it's clear because metalinguistic negation cannot appear in out of the blue sentences, because if it is an objection, it must be an objection to something. Typically is an objection to a previous utterance, but sometimes it can be an objection, for example, to a visual message, or there's an author that says an objection to something in the air, something that the people in the discourse context understand as being proposed, even if it's not uttered aloud. Okay, but it's always responding, is not never initiating, is never out of the blue. And so there are always relative polarity features when you have a metalinguistic negation, but the difference with respect to reverse is that you object, so you don't accept, you don't confirm, but you also do not necessarily reverse. When you reverse, it's because you have not only you have clear evidence that the true proposition is the opposite of the one that was proposed, but you also believe that your addressee will believe you, and so there will be no more dispute on the table. You will both agree that the true proposition is the reversed one. Whereas when you object, it's like you maintain the dispute on the table. You are not accepting the proposition that was proposed, but you may even not have really evidence to propose the opposite. Like in these examples of a União Europeia vai acabar, uma ova que a União Europeia vai acabar. It's two opinions, right? None of the speakers really have evidence to say this proposition is true and this one is false. So the difference between reverse and object is that then the objection does not reverse the value of the absolute polarity feature. If it was plus, it keeps being plus, and therefore, for example, with respect to negative polarity items, since there is no change from affirmation to the negation with respect to absolute features, there is no way that the negative polarity item can be licensed. Raquel, at the beginning, Akil said that you worked with interrogatives. And that's very interesting because well, I have some data on Brazilian Portuguese, but not enough. And because I don't have intuitions and judgments about Brazilian Portuguese, I can't go so far as I go with European Portuguese. But something that I know is that in many cases, for example, in sentences using la, there is clearly an interrogative intonation in those sentences with la. And I don't know which ones you worked, but for example, those with la and an interrogative intonation make me think that la in Brazilian Portuguese in some cases may be associated with rhetorical questions and not really with grammaticalized metalinguistic negation. Or maybe in contemporary Brazilian Portuguese, la can be both. Sometimes a marker of rhetorical questions, sometimes in some particular contexts, a metalinguistic negation marker, and that could also explain why, differently from European Portuguese, in Brazilian Portuguese, it can be pre-verbal or post-verbal, while in European Portuguese, it is obligatorily post-verbal.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Professor Ana Maria, there arrived a comment by email, a comment em português, so I will read in Portuguese. Parabéns, Ana Maria, como falante de português europeu, posso confirmar os juízos de gramaticalidade que estão na base da apresentação. This comment by Ana Maria Brito from Porto. All right, so, well, now as no question has reached us, I would like to ask if someone here in the group would like to ask a question to Professor Ana Maria. Just open your camera and turn on your microphone, please. Have any questions?
Yes,
right?
I have one. Actually, a small comment. Thank you for this very interesting and cartographic talk, which we appreciate a lot, Professor Ana Maria. I have a small comment concerning the use of deictic, temporal, and locative elements conveying metalinguistic negation. You've made an interesting comment on the fact that in European Portuguese, locative and temporal markers, lá, meaning there, agora, now, etc., lexicalize linguistic negative markers. In Brazilian Portuguese, though the corresponding examples featuring agora and lá don't seem to allow the metalinguistic negation reading, at least to me, their double-weight word counterparts can, as in a recent MA thesis I had the pleasure of being the supervisor of by Raquel Souza, the girl that just asked you this last question, who studied non-canonical double-weight structures conveying metalinguistic negation. So, in a sentence like, onde que isso é uma interrogativa, or quando que isso é uma interrogativa, within the appropriate context, convey the same metalinguistic negation interpretation as the structures featuring agora and lá in European Portuguese. Yeah, this is the comment. Thank you.
Muito obrigada. Primeiro também quero agradecer à Ana Maria Brito, ainda bem que uma falante do português europeu concordou com os meus julgamentos. São julgamentos bastante seguros, mas às vezes em relação a estas... sorry, I was speaking Portuguese now. Okay, so thank you for your comments, Achilles, and I was saying that I'm happy that Ana Maria Brito agreed with my judgments on European Portuguese, because sometimes even within the same language there can be variation among speakers with respect to this to the behavior of these markers, and although my judgments with respect to the sentence are very solid. I'm very sure about them. With respect to Brazilian and Portuguese, it seems to me, taking into consideration what you now said about lá and agora, Achilles, that there seems to be variation among Brazilian Portuguese speakers, because I have judgments mainly from Jairo Nunes, and for him, lá and agora can convey metalinguistic negation in Brazilian Portuguese. But in fact, I think, thinking of his judgments, what I think is that agora doesn't seem to me to be really a metalinguistic negation marker in Brazilian Portuguese. It seems to me that due to its semantic meaning of deictic locative meaning now, it can easily go well in rhetorical questions, but without being a grammaticalized metalinguistic negation marker. This is with respect to agora. That's my feeling. With respect to lá, I think that it may be grammaticalized. There is also work by Bruna, something who did a PhD dealing with lá in Brazilian Portuguese, and I guess she also considers it as a marker of metalinguistic negation. I mean, you have like we do the expression sei lá, where lá appears to be clearly negative, although I think that this sei lá in Brazilian Portuguese looks very much like a crystallized expression. Then, according to the data I have from Jairo Nunes, that what I was telling you, he allows it as expressing metalinguistic negation, but with much more variation with respect to word order. And so that's what gave me the feeling that for him and Brazilian Portuguese speakers will allow lá as a marker of some kind of negation. It may be less grammaticalized than European Portuguese and also associated more with the rhetorical questions, because usually the sentences are written with an interrogative marker at the end, and so I guess that spoken will have an interrogative intonation. As for the WH elements, that's also very interesting. So in Raquel's thesis is WH word in this onde que, como que. It looks a little bit like the ones that I found in the literature for Argentinian Spanish, the ones that I didn't talk about because I said it's a mixed type, it's not only the basic type, but I think that there is also an interrogative basis, but an interrogative basis that results in a negative interpretation through some kind of rhetorical question. I don't know what was the Raquel's proposal to analyze those sentences. Did Raquel think it has something to do with rhetorical questions or not?
Raquel, you can answer directly to Professor Ana Maria. Is your microphone working? Can you turn it on, please?
I hope it works because sometimes the computer goes down.
Yeah, it's working.
Okay. But in my thesis, I worked with the sentences with onde and quando, and I analyzed them as a form of denial, so a form of objecting to. But they also sound like rhetorical questions many times. So probably they can change as you propose be more grammaticalized in the future.
And for their position in the left periphery, where did you place them?
I placed them in the focus position.
Okay.
But I propose that they are merged in a lower position, the mirrative, considering that also involves some aspect of mirrativity in Portuguese. So they were right there, and then they merged into focus.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, mirrative, because there is always this very clearly speaker attitude associated with these sentences, right? It's not just negating something, or it's not just not accepting, it's also expressing an attitude of criticism or disapproval or something, right?
Yes, that's very interesting because in your work you said there's some kind of a scale of criticism. You can also realize that with Brazilian Portuguese, with some WH elements, they seem to be more critical than others. Only critical, but not as critical as cadê que a Joana fez isso? Or Joana fez isso que is it even sounds a bit aggressive sometimes. Scale.
So if someone was working with a larger cartography than the one I adopted, we would have more positions, and different positions could give this scale, this graduation also of the strength of the criticism and disapproval and all that. And that would be interesting too, although I'm more prone to, I like to find what unifies things that seem very different from each other. So my investigation has been more in the direction of showing that things that seem very different from each other, in fact, are not so different synthetically, right? But the two components are interesting.
Okay, Professor, thank you. Achilles, Sandra, I think it's time to wrap up. Would you like to say something so we can finish our podcast?
Yeah, I would like to thank you, Ana Maria, for this wonderful talk. I liked it very much. Thank you for your support here. And I'm happy to announce our next Zoom na Cartografia speaker, Professor Sônia Cirino from Unicamp, which is going to give a conference on October 19 at 11 in Brazilian time. And thanks, Ana Maria and our audience for being here with us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandra. It was really a great pleasure. Thank you, all of you, Sandra, Achilles, Bruno, Raquel, João, and I will now go to watch the video that I did not see. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Ana Maria Martins. Thank you, Sandra, for your partnership. Bruno, João, Danton, Letícia, Raquel, thank you very much for making our Zoom na Cartografia possible. Long life to syntactic cartography. And Professor Ana, can we ask you to kindly wait for just 1 minute? We would like to have a pic with you. Okay.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this brilliant talk. Thank you.
Very much, Professor.